Hi guys, second video today. This is a topic that I have had on my heart for a long time. I always wanted to make a video about it, and every time I make another video and I forget about it. Not today. Whoa, I have so much to say about this topic. I don't even know where to start. Well, let me put it like this. I really hate people if they're stupid, ignorant, and flat out speak beyond their knowledge and make bombastic statements about things they don't know anything about. Especially when it comes to the sound business and the audio business. You will see me do this for a while. I had a surgery yesterday. They put a tube down my throat so I could breathe. And my throat today is kind of sore. So it doesn't help when I talk on the camera. Okay. I have seen this so many times in groups, in forums, and online. Especially online. Not so much in interacting with person to person, but mostly online. And I have to tell you, there are some characters online that really shouldn't talk too much. This goes not just for one brand or one type of product or anything like that, but the last that I saw was a pair of Tannoy speakers. And apparently the MSRP or the MAP price on them was like $2,900 for the pair. And these were, from what I can remember, bookshelf speakers from Tannoy. If they're still on the market, I don't know. If it was an old ad, I don't know, maybe it was. But you have always these characters coming out in hordes where they're like, I can't believe they're charging $2,900 for this product. Or I can't believe they're charging $1,500 for this. Or I can't believe they're charging $5,000 for this pair of speakers. Or I can't believe they're charging $6,000 for this amp. Okay. That's your opinion. That's your take on it. That's okay. But then they go on and they say, I can't believe they charged $2,900 for this pair of speakers that has a tweeter, a 6.5 inch, and some wood. And I'm thinking, like, are you really that freaking clueless? Are you really that stupid? Yeah. He, she, or they were, because they said it. And that's how they made it out to be. What they don't think about is, okay, let's say you have a product, a pair of speakers, doesn't matter what brand it is. It doesn't matter who made it. If it was Billie Jean or Tommy Jones or whoever. What you have to remember is the finished product that you see in the store advertised for $2,900. If it's a pair of speakers, let's stay with speakers because it's fairly easy. But you can apply this to other products as well. One, a speaker model from a reputable manufacturer like Tannoy is not made by itself. And it's not being spit out by a machine and whoops, there you go, whoopsie doopsie. Let's charge $2,900 for the pair. That's not how they do it. Let's take Tannoy. When Tannoy sits down, it normally starts with the leadership and the engineers. And they say, well, we are now going to launch a new model. We need a new model. We have had the same models for years. We need a new model. And the leadership in the company calls on the engineers and the designers to come up with some ideas. So they say, hey, we need a new model. We want it to be a bookshelf speaker, roughly like this. And they give a rough sketch or a rough idea on what they want. So it's up to the engineers to come up with a prototype for that, you know. So the engineers goes back to the drawing board. They sit down and they design, the engineer, drivers, driver configuration, box configuration, what type of finish do we want on it, how do we want it to look, what kind of specs do we want the speaker to have. And after they have gotten all that down on the table, then they start a rough outline of what they want to build. That means they're doing sketches, they're doing drawings, they're putting down on paper alternatives, because they don't just do one, they do several, they do like 3 or 4, so they have a selection. Because remember, this is going back up to the board and to the leadership. Once they have done that, this is called pre-engineering. And once they have gotten a nice drawing, they have gotten some nice specs that they think can work in a box like that, then they take it back up to the leadership and they say, was this something like that you wanted us to make? And if the leadership says, yeah, that looks pretty darn good, let's make something like that. Then they go back and they do the final draft and they make like really nice schematics and designer sheets and all that stuff. And once that is done, then they start the engineering of the hardware and the cabinets and all that stuff. And they always build 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 prototypes just to test and have in-house to do their testing. So they then go back up to after they've done a final sketch, they go back up and they say, if most companies don't make their own drivers, okay. So then they say, okay, here it is. These are the specifications that we need on the drivers to make it sound the way we want it to sound. So then it's up to the company, in this case Tannoy, to either use their subcontractor or their build house that makes drivers for them. They send over the specifications with, of course, with some terms on how it should look, how it should perform, and what they're looking for in quality. And of course, what the specifications of the drivers needs to be. So then the build house starts to do this. And sometimes they can say, well, we might have a model that might fit your needs. We can just tweak it a little bit. And if they do that, okay, let's do it. The Tannoy or whatever company that is has to pay the build house for these drivers and for the job that is being done. Then they're being sent back, comes back to the company, and they start manufacturing boxes and cabinets, and they put this in. They manufacture a crossover, and of course they want, as we know, Tannoy is high-end, so they use good parts in their crossovers. So they put together 1, 2, 3, or 4, 5 pairs of prototypes. We are already now in hundreds of thousands, maybe $50,000 to $100,000 range of cost. That's what it cost up until that point. So once they have the prototypes built, then they sit down and they start listening to the product, and they go like, hey, we're not quite there. It sounds good, but we're not quite there. We're missing a little piece right there. We need it to be more open. We need it to be more like, you know, how they go back and forth and like, oh yeah. So then they go back to the build house that builds drivers for them, and they say, the tweeters works, they are good, but we need a little tweak on the mid-range or the woofer. And that's being done, and once again, cost is being accumulated. And then they get some new drivers back, they put that back in, and they go like, yeah, this is what we was looking for. And that's the easy one. And then, of course, they have to go back to the build house and say, okay, our estimate is we're going to build and sell 5,000 pair of these within the next 2 to 3 years. So we need at least 5,000 mids. We need at least 5,000 tweeters. We need a price. And then they get a price. On top of that price, you get shipping costs, taxes, brokering fees, all kinds of stuff. Once the drivers are landed, you get a invoice and a bill, and not only for the drivers but for the shipping. You get a brokerage bill from the people who did the clearing and the customs and stuff like that, and this varies from country to country. If and this was, like I said, the easy part, if the build house doesn't have a standard type of driver that they can just tweak, but Tannoy says, no, we don't want a standard driver, we want something that are unique to us, guess what? Then the build house has to create brand new molds. I have been in this business long enough to know that building a mold, regardless of product, if it's like a referee whistle or a speaker basket or a tub of some kind, each mold that you make in China is going to cost you a minimum of $50,000. And that's just for the mold for the basket. Then you have to have a mold for the cone. You have to have a mold for the dust cap. You have to have a mold for the surround. Everything has to have a mold, so you can build multiple, and so they are the same. And then we're talking about extreme cost. We're talking about, just for the woofer alone, basket, surround, dust cap, cone, 50,000 each. 50, 100, 150, $200,000 just in molds for the woofer. Now we go into the tweeter. You have to have a mold for the faceplate. You have to have a mold for the frame. And don't forget, you have to have magnets made as well. And you have to go to a company that has the right equipment. Demagnetizers and the magnetizer machine, not cheap. Every time you start that sucker up, I tell you, they charge you an arm and a leg for it because it costs a lot. Now, once you get to the point where you either have bought a modified shelf product or you have everything casted and molded and made customly, there are going to be two different costs here, of course, but both of them are very costly. And we are not even come to the point of manufacturing. So now, let's say that Tannoy receives all their drivers that they want, and if they third alternative is they build it themselves, but they still have to build all the molds. They have to invest in all the equipment. Every time, I know a guy who runs a company who builds stuff for others, audio equipment, and he built his own brand for 30 years. Every time they put in a new model into the computer that kind of like cuts wood and stuff like that, the CNC machining and tooling, every time they had to do a tooling reversal or something on a machine, it cost them $300,000. Each time they had to change the tooling on a machine, it was $300,000. Now, let's say we go back to Tannoy, not to get sidetracked here, but let's go back to Tannoy or any other company who makes speakers. Now they have received everything they need of drivers. Now they have to sit down and make crossovers, which means they have to buy parts Maybe they don't make their own print board or something like that, so they have to have that made. That's a tooling cost. That's a production cost. Now they have to buy capacitors, resistors, connectors, all kinds of stuff. Not cheap. And they don't buy 1 or 2 or 5, they buy thousands. So now you got everything you need to put a speaker together. The only thing you need now is to order wood. And we all know that wood is kind of expensive. I urge you to go to Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace, any lumber yard. Look at wood. Look at the prices on wood. And a lot of these speakers have exotic wood and exotic veneer on them. And look up prices on veneer. And we're not talking about them buying 5 meters of veneer. They're buying thousands of meters of veneer. So just the cost of getting everything in to start building what you have already an idea of what you want to do. We're talking about millions of dollars in investment. It's called research and development cost. Now they have to start building it, and they have to pay labor to the people who builds it in their factory. And let's say they have somewhere between 50 and 300 people employed. And let's say, since I think Tannoy is either, I think they have a factory still in England, but their main office is in Singapore or something like that. And let's say they build it in England. Do you know what the minimum wage is in England? Or do you know what the minimum wage is in Singapore? People who work at these factories, they make good money. And they're not cheap. And then, of course, you have to pay not only labor costs and wages and stuff like that, but let's say you are a builder in the United States or in a European country that has rules about how you have to pay employees, how things are. And in the United States, at least in this state where I am, if you have more than 5 employees, you are obligated to offer workman's comp. So you pay labor cost, which is wages. You have people in all kinds of levels, from the floor up to the management. You maybe have a couple of lawyers on a retainer, or you paid lawyers to make disclaimer papers, contracts. They work for you on all ends of things, in and out. You have lawyers to take care of legal papers. You have CPAs to take care of your taxes. And then, of course, you pay utility bill. And I can tell you right away, the utility bill is not cheap. It's not free. I know people who owns factories that are like 20, 25,000, 30,000 square feet, maybe even more. And they pay something like $80,000 a month in utility bills. 80 grand a month. I can tell you one thing. We have a casino down here, half an hour away from me. They pay, the casino down here, they pay $120,000 a month in utility bills. That's just to have power and light in your building. On top of that, you have insurance. You have flood insurance, you have extreme wear insurance, you have disaster insurance, or whatever you call it. You have insurance on your equipment, you have insurance on your crew, you have insurance on your products. If you have a company car or 2 or 3 or 4, you have insurance on that. Not to forget that you pay taxes as a company. Depending on what country you are in, what state you are in, if you are in the United States, many countries over in Europe and in Asia charges people or charges company tax upwards of 57%. On top of that, there's other taxes as well. sales tax, all kinds of tax, local tax. Take Canada, for instance, they have GST and HST, two different taxes on when you sell a product. United States, and they have different taxes from different states, depending on what state you're in. But yeah, there's taxes and taxes and taxes. And that just comes top of utility bills, labor cost, research and development, and we haven't even touched cost like phone, internet. If you have employees that have company phones, you pay for each one of them. You pay internet, and it's not like you at home, you pay $90 a month. No. You see, if you have a company, and let's say you have 100 employees, you have to pay for 100 licenses to Microsoft. 100 licenses. The more employees, the more licenses from Microsoft you have to pay for. If you're a company, the internet provider will charge you accordingly to how many employees you have. The more you're being charged. Simple as that. So, cell phone, landline, whatever, you have to pay for that too. Then, of course, you have, on top of that, you have advertising. You have dealers. You forgot about that one, didn't you? So you see, they set aside a little bit of chunk of money for advertising for each model. They have to. How are people going to know about it? But that's not like the big thing here. Then they have to go to trade shows. They have to go to music shows, music messe, hi-fi shows, high-end shows. They have to pay for booth rent. They have to pay for the people who go there. They have to build the booth. It takes about 2 weeks. I know people who went from the United States to Germany to music messe, setting up a booth. It was a mid-sized booth, not the biggest, not the smallest, mid-sized booth. They paid something like $8,000 for the booth for like 3 or 4 days, which was the cheaper ones, because it's all about location and size. Then they have to build the stand or the booth. They have to pay for the material. They have to build it. They have to have people to build it for you. There's companies down there who do it. And then you have to buy all the stuff to put in there. Then you have to ship every product that you want to display on that hi-fi or that pro audio or car audio show. You have to ship that from your factory. And if this show is in Europe and you're located in Asia or United States, yeah, you have to fly it over. Shipping cost, not cheap. Very often we talk about like containers of gear, okay? Now, when the show is over, you don't want to ship that back. So you hopefully have a dealer in that region that you say, hey, these are display models. I know, I'll make you a good deal. If you take them, I'll make you a good deal. So they sell them for cost almost. Loss. Selling for cost is loss. And the dealer is like, okay, I'll get a good deal and I'll do it. The problem is, let's say you are at one of these shows, and this is how you get customers. This is how you get dealers. So you have to go. So let's say you're a speaker company like Tannoy, you go to a hi-fi show or a high-end show, and let's say you have dealers in 50, 60, 70 countries, but you would like to get a new dealer in a new country you're not already established in, or let's say you have some problems with a dealer in one of the countries and you want to change it out. Yeah, people will do it. People will sign on to become a dealer. I know, I've done it many times. I've been to music messe many times. I signed dealerships many, many times. So then the speaker company and the manufacturer says to the dealer, here are the terms. The dealer looks through it and says, nah. And the manufacturer goes like, well, that's our prices. No. And then the dealer can go like, okay, the dealer can go like, listen, I am one of the biggest dealers in, let's say, Germany. I sell for 22 million euros a year. I can be very beneficial to your company in our country. So I want some better deals. Then they will go back and crunch on the numbers and they will say, okay, we'll give you 10% off on the dealer list. But then you have to buy for a minimum $250,000. And the dealer will like, okay, I can do that. That means that the manufacturer just sliced 10% off their profit. And the manufacturers, they maybe have somewhere between 22 and 28% profit when they sell to dealers. So for them to slice off 5 or 10%, it's a big deal. And then you have the dealers on the other side. They're given the terms, and with the terms comes two prices: MSRP and MAP. MSRP is minimum suggested retail price, which no one ever stays with. And then you have the MAP, which is minimum allowed or minimum advertised price. That's the minimum price that the factory is allowing you to sell it for and advertise it for. And that is where most dealers will be. And some will offer free shipping and some will offer this, and the market is being squeezed. It's all about the price. And who is suffering? Well, I can tell you that both the dealer and the manufacturer takes a big hit. Because when I order products from suppliers and manufacturers, my cut on it is mostly sometimes in the range of 20 to 35%. And that is if I sell it for MSRP. If I sell it for MAP, I'm maybe making 10 or 15 or maybe 18%. So when I sell something for $1,000, 180 bucks of that is profit to me. So you see, a speaker that is advertised for $2,900 that has a tweeter, a 6-inch woofer, and 6 sides of wood has a huge cost. So $2,900 is not that outrageous. Do you know how many speakers they have to sell to recoup their investment? And we're talking about recouping all the cost all the money they have spent to build that model. And this is before they start making money. They don't make a profit before or until they have paid off all the research and development cost, all the costs surrounding building it, all the costs surrounding advertising and marketing it. The dealer can take out a profit right away because they are this last line before the end user and the customer. So of course the dealer, when they sell it, okay, they bought it for $1,000, they sell it for $1,250 or $1,500. Yeah, they get the profit right there and then. But then remember this: the dealers also have cost. The dealers have to pay for shipping. They have to pay for import duties and taxes. They have to pay taxes to the government. They have to pay for utility as well. And they're probably renting a building somewhere for thousands of dollars a month. And they probably have some company cars. They probably have cell phones. They probably have 6, 7, 8, 19, 20, 25 computers, depending on how big they are. So you see, all all the chains in this big, massive chain of developers and sellers, shippers, brokerage companies, CPAs, lawyers, this whole big ball is a big money pit. So until you start understanding what is involved in cost of making something, don't sit on the internet and say, these speakers are not worth $2,900 because they're just a tweeter, mid-range, and some wood. If you are that ignorant and that stupid, please do the world a favor. Keep your fucking mouth shut. Have a nice day.